Hi, welcome to this essentials practice called dusting the corners. And this is about sort of like a deep clean. In this case, it's the range of motion and our joints. That's different from muscle stretches. Once we get to the end of a range, there's really no sense in pushing. That could cause injury. But to spend a little bit of time at the ends of our range really, to me, it both clarifies our range and also makes sure that that range is with us as we practice in more active ways. So we'll be using a block and a strap today. Also, I have an extra mat because we're going to take a quad stretch with a knee bend up the wall. So I have a little bit of wall space available. And so yeah, let's begin. We're going to start on the back. And you're going to start with the block underneath your hips. And it could be at any level. I'll demonstrate the mid-level, but you could go higher, you could go lower, and you're going to center the block on the sacrum. And from here, draw one knee into your chest. And so this is the range of flexion in that hip. And the extension in the other hip can be maxed out by either keeping your foot where it is or by pressing your the other heel forward. So one knee's coming in, the other heel's pressing forward. And if you are rather tight, this is going to be a stretch in the back of the leg, the front of the down leg hip. But if you're rather flexible, you might feel compression, in which case just go to that compression point and then stop. And so this might be the end of your range of motion. When we pause here, take a few breaths in your lower abdomen. So basically this practice is, if you are a relatively tight person, this is going to be a stretching practice. If you are rather flexible in these ways, this is basically just maintenance work at the ends of your range. Okay. So let's switch sides. Please draw your other knee into the chest. So this is hip flexion. And the down leg, you can work on the extension either by staying where you are, or if you want to slide your heel a little bit forward, all the way forward, extend the leg fully. And we're working on side 2 here. Again, this may feel like stretch, this may feel like the end of your range. Also, this may feel like both. But the idea in this practice is to get where you can go and then pause. And let the pose do the work. So there's a couple more breaths here. All right, great. And then you can place both feet on the floor, engage your glutes, lift your hips, and we'll take the block out of the way. From here, both knees into chest. This is option number 1, Vyamuktasana. This is hip flexion in both hips. It's also going to be a rounding of the spine. And if this feels like a good place for you to be, stay here. If you'd like to take happy baby pose, of course you could. The knees would go a little bit wider, and you're going to challenge the range of motion a little more by taking the knees wider, drawing your knees toward the floor. Also, if you are rather flexible, you can extend your heels beyond your head. So for those who are most flexible, the legs actually wind up being straight at this point. And in that case, just pause there and let the pose do some work. So this is hip flexion in both hips. This is also the rounding of the spine. Let the pose do some work and allow your joints to spend time at these corner ranges, the ends of the range. A few more breaths here. All right, very nice. And then as you exhale, from there, release, feet on the floor. Notice the recoiling back to a more neutral spot. All right, great. And then from here, please, we're going to come up to hands and knees. Sit back toward Virasana. So if you need to sit on something and provide support to ankles and knees, for the knees, you would take a block underneath your hips. For ankles, maybe some support, roll up a mat, place some support under ankles. But my hope is this is challenging the ends of your range in ankles and in knees. And have a strap at the ready because we're also going to challenge the shoulders. But to make sure that this feels okay to spend some time in. Okay, so right now I'm sitting on heels. This is sort of option number 2. Option number 3 is to, I roll my calves out of the way and sit in between the heels. So that gives you more knee flexion. Okay, if that feels okay, you stay there. We'll be here for like the next 2 minutes or so. All right, and then eagle arms. You're gonna take your right arm up and slide your left arm underneath, and either A, you take your fingerprints to the top hand, or if you need a strap to bridge the gap, you hold the strap in your right hand and the other arm swings underneath. Okay, so you're here, the arms are crossed over rather well, it's the end of their range. Here, you can also send your elbows forward, tuck your chin a little bit to get more stretch on the back body. And then breathe into back body another few times here. Okay, great. And then your spine can come upright. Unlace your arms, take a couple shoulder blade rolls, and allow that range to become more neutral. This is very green zone here, very common range for us. And then from here, please take your left arm up, right arm swings underneath, and either A, fingerprints are on the top hand. If you're unable to make that match, you can always bridge the gap with the strap. Okay, so we're here. Elbows go forward. That'll also give you some stretch in your mid-back. You can also tuck your chin, round your back a little. And then several breaths into your mid-back. Okay, nice. And as you inhale, arrive out of that, take a couple shoulder blade rolls. And notice how it's been feeling with your knees bent this much, your ankles bent this much. You're gonna come to hands and knees. And as you bring some fluidity back into ankles, you can extend one leg back and gently engage and relax your knee a few times. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and then from here, you can either A, take your hands behind you and draw your shoulder blades in, or B, if your neck is okay with it, you can take rabbit, which the arms wind up kind of imitating rabbit ears. Your head's on the floor, and then you interlace your fingers behind you and lift your arms up and overhead. So in one way or another, I'd like you to challenge the range. We first went the arms in front, that's the end of our range up front. Now we're gonna explore the end of our range behind us. Once again, if it feels like a stretch, notice the stretch. If you're more flexible in the shoulders, you might come up to the compression point, like the final range of motion. I don't want you to push past that because our range determines how we can safely move, okay? So if you're here, you can draw your shoulder blades in, you might get a stretch on the front, across the heart center. Breathe into that. If you're in rabbit, of course there's some rounding of the neck as well. Pause here another breath or two. Okay, great. And then from there, you can come out of that, couple shoulder blade rolls in one direction, couple shoulder blade rolls in the other direction. Okay, and from here, we're gonna have a Yin Lunge. This is gonna be rather dynamic in terms of the number of joints we're working with. So from hands and knees, you can step your right foot forward. It's not gonna come quite as far forward as in a regular lunge though. It's gonna be back a little bit so you can relax your knee over your foot. Now you see how that challenges the ankle in the other direction. So in Virasana, we were like this. Now in this lunge, we're really flexing the ankle. The knee is also bending, the hip is very much flexing. My left hand stays on the floor, my right hand can help balance. If the floor feels very far away, you can always take a block underneath your left hand as well. Okay? So if this is enough to deal with, the hips are going in opposite directions. The idea is to relax into this, so you're really at the end of your range in a yin way, a relaxed way. If this is enough work for your body, just to work on the legs, stay there. If you like to work on your back bend as well, you can kind of lean into your back by, which I do by twisting a little and then kind of leaning away from my front knee. So I'm adding a little bit of gentle compression into my back body. And of course, as with all of these compression points, the ends of our range, we never want to force it, it's just relaxing into it. So try this for a couple more breaths. If that is too much to work on the low back, you can just stay up like this. Okay? So yeah, 2 more breaths. Okay, great. And then take your hands to the floor, shift your hips back, come to hands and knees, and then let's change sides. So you're gonna step your left foot forward. I'm changing orientations, you don't have to. And once again, the foot's not gonna come quite as far forward as in active lunges. And then what that's gonna do is allow distal flexion of the ankle. That also means that the knee is more bent. That also means that the hips are toward the ends of their range. If you can relax your hip down, now you're getting all these joints, kind of like the theme, dusting the corners. We're kind of getting into the corners of our range and allowing the tissues to experience that range and become adaptable to it. If this is enough for you, you stay here, hands on the floor, left hand to the thighs, another way to do that. If you'd like to explore your back bend, you can twist a little bit, and it's like you're leaning away from your front knee. So it's like a revolved, like twisting back bend, Yin Lunge. So it's a lot of joints at once. Notice what you can notice. Few breaths here. And at this side, the range feels a little bit different. Notice the difference of experiences when you're at your range, the end of ranges. All right. Both hands to the floor. Press your hips back up. All right. Very good. And then so that's option number 1, is to repeat these lunges again. Option number 2, and this is where I have some support for my knee, is you're going to take your right knee onto some support on the floor and take your foot up the wall. Now it's your choice whether to use the toes pointing up or the toes curl under, whichever makes more sense for you. But the closer you get your knee to the wall, the more your knee is going to bend. For those who are tighter in the thighs, that also means a tighter, a more dramatic stretch for the thighs. Okay, so you kind of stay here with the knee on the floor. If you'd like, my option number 2 is my hands on the block. Option number 3, if you can come up, this is going to again make for a more dramatic stretch. To work on the extension in your down leg, slide your glutes down and lift your lungs. Okay. And finally, if you're up and this feels balanced and rather comfortable, you can interlace your fingers and press your palms up toward the ceiling. Draw your shoulder blades in, so you can work on the range of your arms that way too. So another few breaths here. Glutes slide down, lungs lift. And take a deep breath in. Take a big exhale. And one last time, breath in. Okay, great. From there you can come forward. Bring the knee forward. Pause there for a moment. You might notice the difference between thighs. Right, and then let's try that on the other side. So you're going to take your left knee to the floor, right foot on the floor. And again, the closer your knee gets to the wall, basically the more knee bend is required and the more stretch you'll get in the thigh. Okay, so option number 1 is to stay hands on the floor and just work that. Option number 2, you can elevate yourself part way by taking your left hand on a block. Okay. Option number 3, sans block, you take your hands to the thigh. Glutes can slide down as your lungs lift. Okay. And if this feels like the end of your range, pause there, breathe. If this feels relatively easy to balance within, you can interlace your fingers, also press your palms up toward the ceiling. All right. Yeah. And allow the pose to do some of the work. There's 2 or 3 more breaths here. All right. Great. And then you come back out of that, you release. One knee down, other knee down. Pause, allow the tissue, especially the quads, the thigh muscles to kind of recoil back to their normal range. All right, great. And then from here, so camel is a rather advanced posture if your back is not used to this, if your hips are not used to this. So camel as option number one, you could always be up here and not go back at all into camel. And you can interlace your fingers behind you. You can also take the strap behind you and send your arms back like this. So this is getting the range of the shoulders way back, okay? And you don't have to worry about any back bend at all, okay? So that's with the hips forward, you're upright. Camel as a back bend, you would stop yourself from falling too far by taking your hands down to your heels. Now, for those whose back bends aren't in their practice, stay with this and just work on the stretch of the front body. But if you're rather flexible in this way, you don't have to push at the low back. You can just kind of dip into your low back a little bit of it's almost like a gust of wind to lift the heart up. And you can draw your shoulder blades in a little bit, and that gets you toward the end of your range in your arms as well. So this is end of range for hip extension and spinal extension and the arms going behind you as well. So arm extension as well. So 2 or 3 more breaths here. Take a deep breath in. Big exhale. Breath in. Exhale. And one last time, take a deep breath in. Okay, great. And you come back up from there, around to seated. Okay, and then from there, you place your feet together. Last pose today, as you take your feet together, notice that the efforts of the back bend in your front body. And then you take your knees toward the floor. To go in the opposite way, you can round your spine a little. This is also going to be the hips sliding back. Okay? And if all of this makes sense, these are all options in terms of energy in the pose. If it makes sense, you can press your elbows or your hands into your thighs and work on this it's sort of a combo of rotation and abduction of the hips. If you'd like to as well, you can round your spine, tuck your chin. It's another spinal flexion here. And once again, if you're really tight, this is going to be a stretch phenomenon. If you're rather mobile, flexible, this is going to be a joint phenomenon, and the technique is a little bit different. So stretch, you find a stretch that works. Joint work, you go to what the joint gives you, and then you stop. You don't try to push past it. So last 30 seconds here. All right, great. And then you come back up, release out of Baddha Konasana. All right, and thank you. So hopefully this felt like an appropriate practice, regardless of whether this was a stretch-based practice or a joint-based practice. I hope it felt like a good way to kind of dust off the corners, as I say, and work on our range of motion. So thank you so much. Take care. Namaste.